then the next step I think is essential. And so with that said, I'm going to begin by telling you that if you want to go far, you have to quit. Just quit. And I see some of you guys looking at me like, what? That's a complete opposite. So I quit. See you guys later. Yeah, so that's it. So if you really want to go far, you really need to quit the following. And this is really something that I've been meditating on. I've been going through some challenges, even myself, in the last few weeks, and I'm going to open up a little bit about that so you guys gain perspective. But I think one of the things is I talk about what is it that I could be doing to be better, to be more productive. And what really hit me is that we get so focused on what we need to be doing in order to be more successful that we're not able to really go back and reflect. And so what ends up happening is we forget the importance of quitting the actions that actually keep us in that cycle of failure. And what I want to talk about today is you can implement a lot of great things, but if you don't eliminate the things that keep bringing you down and you don't quit on those, then ultimately you're going to always get the same result. You may go a little further, but at some point, inevitably, something's going to happen where those actions that you didn't deal with end up bringing you back down. Does that make sense? And so one perfect example, obviously not that, I don't smoke. That's a good thing. But as you guys know, there's a massive campaign now that's going out to everybody. And everywhere you go, they talk about how smoking is bad for you, right? And so when is the best time to quit, right? Now, never start, right, is the first goal. But if you've been smoking for 20 years, then the next best time to quit is now. But understanding that now you have 20 years of damage done to your lungs, right? You guys follow? So while there's still consequences, there's still today. You could deal with something today and quit. Now, again, this wasn't a commercial for not smoking. The point I want to make is a great analogy of we can talk about all the pretty words and all the power words and all the synergy words and all the things that make us successful. But if we don't deal with those things and quit the things that really hold us back, it's going to come back to the surface. And so what I want to do is talk about specifically 4, but there might be 5 if I feel in my heart I need to share with you. But there's 4 key things that if we don't quit, we'll never reach that next level. And it starts with complaining. And that's the very first thing that I want to challenge us. And I'll be honest with you, I find myself at times when there's a lot of stress complaining. So I'm not saying, oh, here's the great Rick Malero that doesn't fall. I'm opening up to you to tell you that, hey, there's times where I have to be conscious about the fact that I'm a whiner. I'm complaining about something because I'm frustrated, right? And so what it triggers is this negative mentality. And I'm going to give you this quote that's really powerful. It says, when you complain, you make yourself a victim. And I'm going to stop there for just a minute before I finish the quote. That is the biggest risk that you could take if you want to be successful. Because when you become a victim, you lose your power. You lose your ability to make change. You lose your ability to move forward. And it doesn't matter what's going on in your life. When you become the victim, you have already lost the battle. And that's the problem. So when we begin to complain, we immediately put ourselves in danger. And I want to challenge us to really stop doing that. So now the rest of the quote, I believe, is part of the solution, which is leave the situation, change the situation, or accept it. All else is madness. So I want us to think about that for just a minute. You see, things are going to happen. We're going to make mistakes. The company's going to have issues. You're going to have personal issues. I mean, for example, I'm sure Monique strategically planned to get the flu and strep throat because she just wanted to miss the first week of coming back to the office. We all know that, right? Like she would rather feel miserable and almost die than to come to work, right? 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 But instead of, right? But if you think about it, it's like, oh, I'm dying. The poor girl's texting me, right? And I have a picture of her that now it's a blackmail picture, by the way. But the point I'm trying to make, guys, think about how many times we begin to complain about a situation, and that's the very thing that renders us inactive, right? And so the reality is, in all parts of our business and our lives, we're going to have circumstances. So we can either complain about them, or we can learn from them and ask ourselves, do I need to leave this situation because it's dangerous? There's no outcome here, right? Because sometimes the best thing to do is walk away. Would you agree? Or do I need to change the situation? Is there something that I can do to transition so that we can turn this into a positive? Or is it something that I need to accept? And to be honest with you, that's probably one of the hardest things for me to do. If you have a limitation or something that, for example, like Darla was just talking about the marathon runners with no legs. I mean, they can complain about the fact that they don't have any legs. Would you agree? Or they can accept the fact that they don't have any legs. And now what? Right? Now all of a sudden they're freed because they've accepted their circumstances, and they can now literally rise above the ashes of that and become something that inspires everybody around them. Does that make sense? And that's the reason why complaining is something we have to quit. If 2020 is going to be a success, we have to quit complaining. Does everybody agree? Yes. Okay, whoever doesn't, you're fired. Just kidding. Next, blaming others. Now, this is a very toxic piece, but I want to read this quote. When you blame others, you give up your power to change. Now, the reality is there are people that need to be blamed, meaning there are people that are going to drop the ball, right? Some are doing it for evil purposes. Others just drop the ball because of various reasons. So I want you to understand that this does not give a free pass to the person dropping the ball. Okay, it's not a free pass for the person who hurt you or the person who hurt the team to say, well, you can't blame me, so I'm away. I got my getaway out of jail card. No, that person is responsible for their actions, just like we're responsible for our actions. However, if I spend the time blaming that person, I lose my power of making the shift and the change now. It's very similar to complaining. But the other thing that's really dangerous about blaming other people, and this is something I've learned because I do it too. Guess what? I do it, right? Is you get to the point that you keep blaming those people for the lack of whatever missed, whatever fell apart. But then I'm not able to literally look back in the mirror and say, where did I have a part in this? And how can I make this better? And I'll give you a perfect example. We've been really busy last year. We had several projects that we had a contractor who screwed us, like royally screwed us. And we're thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars off the budget, and headaches and timing, from project management issues to, I mean, you name it. And so I've been dealing with that in the last week to try to come up with a solution to repair those problems. And I found myself falling in the blaming game. Well, this stupid contractor. Well, why wasn't project management done correctly? Well, why wasn't the accounting done? And what I started realizing is that if I don't look back and say, well, Rick, you were so busy that you didn't spend a diligent amount of time making sure that you were holding project management accountable, making sure that you opened your eyes to go see the project yourself when there was a red flag. Do you see how all of a sudden the thing that I'm blaming somebody else on, I myself could improve upon? Does that make sense? And if I wouldn't have gone through that process of stopping the madness and quitting blaming others, I wouldn't have realized that I too have a hand in this and that I too can make change. And so now what that's allowed me to do is to shift the power back and working through a solution. So now I'm working with the contractor. Actually, the way I think is different, which is incredible. Before I was like, this guy, we're screwed. We're going to lose all this money. I mean, thousands of dollars out the window, delays, and you know, this is going to hurt our clients. I mean, you name it. I'm going through like this, and all because of you, right? And then what I didn't realize is that the moment I started opening up and saying, well, before I start blaming people, where did I fall short? And it freed me to then start thinking about solutions. Now I'm actually even coordinating a meeting with the culprit, and I'm going to hold them accountable. But the way I think now is different. I'm coming up with strategic ways to make up some of those losses so that we can fix the problem. Does that make sense? And so what I want to challenge us this year as well is stop blaming your peers or your family members or your friends. Begin to look first and say, where did I have a hand in this? And what can we learn from this so that in the future, we don't repeat the same mistakes? Because guys, failing is inevitable. That's what I called in my book, failing forward, right? It doesn't matter. We're going to fail. We're going to make mistakes. We're not perfect. But it's what we do when we fail that determines whether we're going to be successful or not. Either we turn it into a stepping stone for success, or we wallow in our loss and we blame everybody else and we never rise above the ashes. And again, so blaming others is not the solution. So just quit it. Join me as I commit to quitting blaming other people. Now, like I said, that does not mean that that contractor, project management, accounting, all those things are not accountable. That's still responsibility of those individuals along with me. But what it does is it frees us to be able to pivot, learn, and then realign ourselves to the right strategies. Everybody with me so far? And what I've also learned is when you blame other people, think about how many times, and I'm not going to say raise your hand because some of you have felt this more than others. You go to a team meeting to talk about a project or a situation, and as soon as something goes wrong, the fingers are pointing at you. And you're like, wait a minute, just last week, you wanted me to have your back, and now you're pointing it at me as if it's my fault because you don't want to be held accountable, right? You guys agree that that's not a safe environment either. when everybody's always blaming everybody else. And so if we know that we don't want somebody to point the finger at us, then stop pointing the finger at somebody else and go alongside that person and say, hey, look, I'm going to be honest with you. You dropped the ball big time. You royally screwed up, but it's okay. We all do. What can I do to help you? What can I do to lift this up so that we don't do this anymore? Let's fix the current problem, and then let's figure out a way to do it better next time so we don't even have this problem. Does that make sense? So that's what I want to challenge us to do, is let's quit blaming and let's start helping one another to realign ourselves so that we can get the power back and be successful.